Jim, I'm not sure how you become a champion. I mean, the biggest thing in being able to be a champion is to understand yourself.
I never had a problem with losing as long as I gave it my best effort.
In the back of me said, yeah, I'd like to have all the money you pissed away.
He was insane. That is what golf legends say when they remember the first time they faced Nick Faldo. But here is the thing, they are not talking about his swing or his talent. They are talking about something far more terrifying. They are talking about a man who turned himself into a machine, a player who refused to lose even when his body was failing, a competitor who would report his own friends for breaking rules, and a champion who destroyed the dreams of American legends one playoff hole at a time. This is the story of how Nick Faldo changed golf forever by breaking the men who stood in his way. Before we dive into the battles that made Faldo a legend, let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of a 20-year-old rookie beating the world #1 while running a high fever? Or a player who rebuilt his entire golf swing for 2 years just to become more consistent under pressure? These are the kinds of stories we are going to uncover today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me which Faldo moment shocks you the most. Your support helps us bring you more incredible golf stories like this one. The year was 1977. Nick Faldo was just 20 years old and he was sick, really sick. He had glandular fever and was running hot and cold with a high temperature. Most players would have withdrawn from competition, but this was the Ryder Cup at Royal Lytham. This was the biggest stage in golf, and Faldo was about to announce himself to the world in the most dramatic way possible. To understand what happened next, you need to know what European golf looked like before Faldo. It was romantic, it was cavalier, it was filled with talented players who had beautiful swings and charismatic personalities, but they lost. They lost to the Americans year after year. The Ryder Cup was not competitive. It was a parade. The Americans would show up, dominate, and go home with the trophy. European players were seen as nice competitors who simply did not have what it took to win when it mattered most. That was the world Nick Faldo entered, and he was about to prove that everything was about to change. His first victim was Jack Nicklaus. Yes, that Jack Nicklaus, the Golden Bear, the greatest player in golf history. On day 2 of the competition, Faldo and his partner Peter Oosterhuis were matched against Nicklaus and Raymond Floyd in the team format. These were 2 of the most dominant players America had ever produced. The result should have been predictable. It was not. Faldo and Oosterhuis destroyed them. They won 3-1. It was not close. It was not lucky. It was a comprehensive dismantling of the greatest player who ever lived. Years later, when Faldo brought up this match to Nicklaus, the Golden Bear had no memory of it. None. He actually asked Faldo if they had even played together. Nicklaus explained his philosophy simply: you want to get rid of what you lose. This was how champions protected their confidence. They deleted the losses from their mental hard drive. But for Faldo, this match was everything. It was proof that he belonged. It was evidence that even legends could be beaten, and he remembered every single detail. He even corrected himself later when he realized they won 3-1, not 2-1. That is the difference between the 2 men. Nicklaus forgot because it did not matter to him. Faldo remembered because it defined him. But Faldo was not done. On the final day, he faced Tom Watson in singles. Watson had just won the Open Championship 2 months earlier in the famous duel in the sun against Nicklaus. He was the best player in the world. He was at the absolute peak of his powers, and he was about to lose to a sick 20-year-old rookie. Faldo beat Watson 1-up. He did it while suffering from glandular fever. He did it while barely able to stand. The match was described as astonishing by those who witnessed it. Watson was shocked. The entire golf world was shocked. This was not supposed to happen. Rookies did not beat the world #1. Sick players did not win matches against healthy champions. But Faldo did. And in that moment, he crossed a psychological threshold. He proved to himself that even when everything was against him, he could outlast the best in the world over 18 holes. There is a beautiful irony to this story. 10 years later, when Faldo won his first Open Championship at Muirfield, it was Tom Watson who had helped him with his swing earlier that season. The man Faldo beat as a rookie became an architect of the swing that would conquer the world. But while Faldo was battling Americans on the biggest stages, something darker was happening with his European peers. The relationships that would define the rest of his career were being forged in fire, and not all of them would survive. Sandy Lyle and Nick Faldo grew up together in British junior golf. They were born just months apart. They played on the same England boys teams. They were supposed to be friends. They were supposed to be the future saviors of British golf together. But one incident in Kenya changed everything. It happened at the Kenya Open in the early 1980s. The African sun was blazing. Sandy Lyle was playing well and heading for a top 3 finish. But there was a problem. Lyle had placed a piece of tape on the top edge of his putter to reduce the glare from the sun. This is a technical violation of the rules of golf. You cannot alter the playing characteristics of a club during a round. Nick Faldo was playing alongside Lyle. He saw the tape, and he made a decision that would haunt their relationship for decades. Faldo did not warn Lyle immediately. He did not pull his friend aside and tell him to remove the tape. He waited. He kept the information to himself himself until the appropriate time. Then he reported it to an official. Sandy Lyle was disqualified from the tournament. Lyle was devastated. He had worked incredibly hard in the brutal heat. He had fought his way into contention, and now it was all gone because of a piece of tape. But what hurt even more was that it was Faldo who reported him. Not a stranger, not an opponent from another country. His friend, his countryman, the man he had grown up playing junior golf with. The incident destroyed their relationship. Lyle later said the whole thing was devastating. Other players on tour began to see Faldo differently. Sam Torrance called him prickly. Others said he was a loner who placed rules above camaraderie. The nice guy facade had dropped. The real Nick Faldo had been revealed. There is a painful irony to what happened next. In 1989, Sandy Lyle won the Masters. He became the first British player to win at Augusta National. 1 year later, Nick Faldo won the same tournament. And according to tradition, the previous year's champion helps the new champion into the green jacket. So there was Sandy Lyle standing on the green at Augusta, helping Nick Faldo into the jacket. The man who reported him in Kenya was now wearing the green jacket that Lyle had to hand him. The tension beneath that ceremony must have been unbearable. But not all of Faldo's relationships with European players were toxic. Ian Woosnam and Faldo had a different dynamic. They came from completely different worlds. Woosnam was the street fighter, the aggressive player who went straight at every pin. Faldo was the technician, the mechanical player who never took unnecessary risks. But somehow they worked together perfectly. In their early days, before fame and fortune, Woosnam remembers riding around on motorcycles with Faldo. They were just two young players trying to make it, struggling with logistics and money, trying to find their way in professional golf. It was a simpler time before swing coaches and major championships and millions of dollars. Their greatest moment together came at the 1987 Ryder Cup at Muirfield Village. This was the first time they were paired together in competition, and they were brilliant. They combined to win 3.5 points out of 4. This partnership was instrumental in Europe claiming their first ever victory on American soil. Woosnam described their chemistry perfectly. Nick is very steady and is always going to be consistent, whereas I was a very aggressive player. We just played so well in foursomes. The partnership worked because of trust. Woosnam could fire at pins knowing Faldo would never put them in trouble. Faldo could play conservatively knowing Woosnam would make birdies when they needed them. They were opposites. But on the golf course, they were perfect together. They would partner again in 1989 and win more points. But by 1991, the partnership had dissolved. They struggled and were separated. Still, the 1987 pairing remains the gold standard of European Ryder Cup cooperation. It proved that Faldo could function within a team if the strategic fit was perfect. But there was one European peer who never got along with Faldo. Sam Torrance represented everything Faldo was not. Torrance was social. He was warm. He was the glue that held the European team together. Faldo was isolated. He was cold. He went to bed early while others celebrated. He focused on his swing while others built friendships. The friction between them lasted decades. Years later, Torrance referred to Faldo as an asshole in a magazine interview. This was not just anger from one moment. This was decades of frustration. Torrance remembered an incident where Faldo walked past the press without speaking. The headline the next day read, "Faldo to World Tour, bugger off." That was the Faldo that Torrance knew. A man who refused to engage in the social culture of the tour. A man who saw his intense focus as necessary, but others saw as rudeness. Between 1985 and 1987, something remarkable happened. Nick Faldo disappeared. Not physically, but competitively. Despite being a successful player, he realized his swing would not hold up under the most extreme pressure of major championships. So he made the most dangerous decision of his career. He enlisted coach David Ledbetter to completely rebuild his swing from scratch. For 2 years, Faldo sacrificed results. He endured criticism. He watched other players win tournaments while he struggled with a new action. His fellow professionals thought he was crazy. Why would someone who was already winning change everything? But Faldo saw what they could not see. He knew that natural talent and feel would fail him when the pressure became unbearable. He needed a swing that was built for war. A swing that would hold up when his hands were shaking and his heart was pounding. When he emerged in 1987, he was no longer the player who relied on touch and feel. He was a machine. His swing was pressure-proof. It was repeatable. It was robotic. And it was about to destroy the dreams of 3 American legends. Paul Azinger met the new Nick Faldo at the 1987 Open Championship at Muirfield. Azinger went into the final round with a 1-shot lead. He held that lead through the front 9. He looked poised to win his first major championship, but Faldo was doing something that day that had never been done before in a major final round. He was playing perfect golf without being spectacular. Faldo parred every single hole. 18 consecutive pairs, no birdies, no bogeys, just relentless, grinding, mechanical perfection. The pressure on Azinger became unbearable. He could feel Faldo behind him. He could feel the consistency. He could feel the inevitability. And on the 17th and 18th holes, Azinger cracked. He made bogey on both. Faldo won by a single stroke. As they shook hands on the 18th green, Faldo said something to Azinger that would spark a feud lasting 20 years. "Tough luck, old boy." To Azinger, an intense American competitor, this felt patronizing. It felt condescending. It felt like Faldo was rubbing salt in the wound. Years later, Azinger was asked about Faldo trying to rebrand himself as a lovable television commentator. His response was brutal. "If you are going to be a prick and everyone hates you? Why do you think that just because you are trying to be cute and funny on air, now that the same people are all going to start to like you? The scar from Muirfield ran deep. Ozinger did not just lose a golf tournament, he felt beaten by someone who held him in contempt. If Ozinger's loss was a slow bleed, Scott Hawk's loss to Faldo was a sudden, violent execution. The 1989 Masters ended in a playoff between Faldo and Hoke. Faldo had shot an incredible final round 65 to force his way into contention. Now they were on the 10th hole in sudden death, and Hoke had a putt to win the green jacket. The putt was roughly 2 feet, maybe 30 inches. Faldo had already made bogey. The tournament was over. Hoke just needed to make the putt. He backed off, he reset, and then he knocked it 5 feet past the hole. He missed. The tournament continued. On the next hole, the 11th, under fading light, Faldo sank a 25-foot birdie putt to win. Scott Hawk later said he was hurt by the media labeling him a choker. The headlines were brutal. Hoke as in choke. The incident was so traumatic that it became one of the most infamous moments in Masters history. And once again, Faldo had not beaten his opponent with brilliance. He simply waited for them to beat themselves. His presence, his consistency, his aura created the pressure that froze Hawk's hands. 1 year later, Faldo was back in a playoff at Augusta, this time against Raymond Floyd. Floyd was 48 years old. He was attempting to become the oldest Masters champion in history. He had led for much of the final round. He was the sentimental favorite, but Faldo ground him down and forced a playoff. They went to the 11th hole, the same hole where Faldo had beaten Hawk the year before. Floyd, usually a master of course management, pulled a 7-iron into the pond guarding the green. Faldo played safely to the center of the green. He too putted for par. He claimed his second consecutive green jacket. For Floyd, this was a devastating end to a glorious week. For Faldo, it cemented his status as the dream killer. He had now denied Ozinger at the Open. He had denied Hawk at the Masters. And he had denied Floyd at the Masters. All in excruciating fashion. All by refusing to make mistakes while watching legends crumble. These were not victories of brilliance. These were victories of inevitability. Faldo did not win by making eagles or hitting miracle shots. He won by making pairs when it mattered most. He won by forcing others into situations where they had to be perfect. And when they were not perfect, he was there waiting. Cold, mechanical, inevitable. The legends of golf did not merely meet Nick Faldo. They collided with him. For the older generation like Nicklaus and Watson, he was the signal that British golf was back. He was the 20-year-old who refused to be intimidated. For his peers like Lyle and Woosnam, he was the complex rival who could be a brilliant partner, but also a ruthless rule enforcer. And for the Americans of the late 80s like Ozinger, Hoke, and Floyd, he was the machine that destroyed their dreams. What made Faldo so devastating was not his talent. It was his refusal to beat himself. Every player he faced learned the same lesson. If you wanted to defeat Nick Faldo, you had to be perfect for 18 holes. You had to make every putt. You had to hit every fairway. You had to never crack under pressure. And as history shows, in the crucial moments, very few were. These first encounters were not just introductions. They were warnings. They were glimpses of what was coming. A new era of European golf dominance, a new standard of mental toughness, a new level of preparation and precision. Nick Faldo did not just win golf tournaments. He changed the way champions were made. So the next time someone tells you about the greatest golfers of all time, remember this. Remember the sick 20-year-old who beat Tom Watson. Remember the man who reported his friend in Kenya. Remember the machine who made 18 pairs to win the Open. Remember the champion who won 2 Masters in playoffs by never making mistakes. That was Nick Faldo. And every legend who faced him for the first time learned that same terrifying truth. He was insane, not because of what he could do, but because of what he refused to do. He refused to lose. And that made all the difference. If you enjoyed this deep dive into golf history, do me a favor and hit that like button. Share this video with your golf buddies and let me know in the comments which Faldo story surprised you the most. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.